Good morning. Welcome in. The Out of Bounds Show is brought to you by all of the Miskelly Sleep Stores. It's where you want to go to get your next mattress, powered by Miskelly and the Miskelly Sleep Stores, including the purple mattress, which is amazing, and the one that I sleep on. We're live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone. Brought to you by Miskelly Furniture and the 7 Miskelly Sleep Stores in the state of Mississippi. We're streaming live on thezone1059.com. We'll have Steve Deace coming up here in just a second. And you can watch the show right now on YouTube. Search Out of Bounds Sports, or Facebook. Search the Out of Bounds Show. And we welcome in the man, the myth, and the legend on Twitter. If you thought he is hilarious to follow when he is watching Michigan sports, especially Michigan football, Wolverine, basketball, and Detroit Lions football, we welcome in Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast on Twitter. Steve joins us on the Patron Tequila guest line. Steve Deace, good morning. How are you?
I feel like I'm doing the time warp. Like this is exactly where we were a year ago. But other than that, man, I'm great. How are you?
All right. If you had to handicap your head coach right now, Jim Harbaugh, who has done a hell of a job putting y'all back on the map and back-to-back college football playoff appearances and beat Ohio State and absolutely took them out in the fourth quarter in the horseshoe. But as you said, the rumors to the NFL are swirling. If you had to handicap this, give it to me.
60% Michigan, 40% NFL. And I think that's mainly because I'm not as convinced that the NFL is as interested in him as he is in them. I think they are more interested than they were a year ago. A second year of that kind of elite success with his NFL resume. I think people don't realize that of all time of coaches that have coached at least 4 years in the NFL, he has a top 5 win percentage in the history of the NFL. I don't think people realize that. So the problem is he's pushing 60. The problem is he's odd, weird. And for college kids who can be odd, weird, quirky, and there's, 85 guys on scholarship with a lot of different personalities and agendas and behaviors, that kind of can fit in. But when it's 53 guys and they're married with kids and they got married man problems and they don't have time for your stuff, shall we say, that can get a little laborious. It's also outside what the norm has been for NFL hirings recently. It's been, younger, offensive minds, geniuses. My Detroit Lions kind of are the only team in the last few years that's hired more of your traditional kind of, grit, bite their kneecaps football coach.
The kneecap biter, man. Heck yeah.
Yeah, and Jim's more in a Dan Campbell mode, but even weirder. I think they're more serious than they were a year ago. I still don't know for sure though how serious they are, and I don't think Michigan's a plan B or one way or the other. I think that it is the analogy I have used is Guinevere loves Lancelot and Arthur at the same time.
Yeah.
And I think Lancelot is the NFL, Arthur is Michigan, and now the problem with hey, that happens, man. You can't help who you fall in love with, but the problem is Camelot gets destroyed in the uncertainty. And so what I did in my latest episode is I said, if I were Michigan, this is what I would do. The dead period ends this weekend. We can't have a second straight Wisconsin, Iowa level recruiting class because the coach is spending the first month of contact flirting and interviewing with the NFL. That's what killed us a year ago. We can't do that. So you have one of those kinds of classes. It's fine if the other 3 are still Michigan level, but you can't have back-to-back classes like that and stay at this level. So if I'm Michigan, what I do is I put a 10-year, $15 million a year deal on his table, guaranteed for 10 years. That's about what he get in the NFL, and certainly with a new TV deal, Michigan can afford it. So 10-year, $15 a year deal. It's all guaranteed, but has a $50 million buyout.
Ooh.
Because the reality is, it doesn't matter what amount of money we put on there, the NFL could have outbid him for if they really wanted him.
True.
And rival coaches are going to notice that. And they're going to say, hey, you're the only program in America whose coach did this 2 years in a row. So he got a big contract. He got a big one last year too. How do you know for sure he's not going anywhere? We need to be able to say that he's not going anywhere. If not, as good of a job as he has done, I mean, what coaches would line up and say, let me see, do I want to coach J.J. McCarthy, Blake Corum, and Donovan Edwards next year? All of them pretty much is the answer. All of them is pretty much the answer. So you say to him, appreciate what you did. We didn't think it'd take you 8 years to get us to this point, but we're glad that you did. We're going to take this as your resignation. We'll pay you the money you're owed, and we will move on and begin the process of hiring another coach, because there's life after J.J. McCarthy, and it will look like 7-5 if we have another recruiting class like the one we just had, especially with USC coming into the Big Ten and everything else. Can't be doing this, all right? And so I think Michigan needs to put a take it or leave it Godfather offer that is NFL-like money guaranteed, but with indemnity that protects them on the back end, and make Guinevere make a decision. Because I don't know if you guys know how that story ends. Camelot collapses when she can't choose.
All right, so Steve Deace at Michigan Podcast on Twitter, Michigan Insider. He joins us on the Out of Bounds show. We're talking Jim Harbaugh. I like where you're going with that contract. When do you expect something to happen? Yeah, this is a big week.
This is a big week because of the dead period, and because we went through this a year ago, and he's got to start recruiting again. And last year, he promised Michigan 7 years. I don't blame him for wanting the NFL. It's the highest level. He came 6 inches short of winning the Super Bowl, and then lost it to his brother of all people, who is a dramatically better athlete than, and has to listen to that smack talk at Thanksgiving and Christmas for the rest of his life. Right? We're all dudes. I don't blame him for that at all. It can't be at the expense of the larger mission. And frankly, I'd rather actually hire a new coach now. If he's going to go in the next couple of years, I mean, we're going to have the preseason number 1 team next year, no lower than number 2, number 3. We're the only team in the top 7 or 8 in the final 8 people who's returning a starting quarterback, and he might be the number 1 pick in the NFL draft. So we're going to be a top 3 team if we have any season similar to what we had a year ago. So just like I said a minute ago, that his oddities are still a problem, but I think they're less of a problem.
Hey, will you describe that? Will you share a story? You're wired in, or people who have been around him. Kind of because I've heard that, and one of the in-house Michigan guys joined the Mississippi State staff about 2 years ago, and talked about how odd and weird Jim Harbaugh is. What can you share a story or an example of his quirkiness?
Gosh, they're so legion, whether it's, climbing trees for recruits, sleeping at a recruit's house for a kicker, not a 5-star quarterback, for a kicker. All right. It's his idiosyncrasies, colloquialisms. It's the way that, Jake Buck, our great tight end, who won the Mackey a few years ago, works at the Big Ten Network now. I mean, he said when he played there, the idea of going to Jim Harbaugh with a personal problem, or if you had an issue with what was going on with a position coach, he wasn't that level of accessible. And now he's completely changed his persona in just the last couple of years, and has actually, become more of a CEO and more of a buddy to the players. I think that this isn't a button down business transactional process like what is in the NFL. It's just not. And he's not like that. And that's why you see a tendency of him to wear thin. I mean, look at the way this contract negotiation has gone now for 2 straight years. This is a living, breathing example right here. Last year, when he came back, he said, "Hey, I'm not doing this again." Well, we're doing this again. He said in December, "I'll be enthusiastically back coaching the Michigan football team." Now he's saying, "Well, I think I'll be back, but no man knows the future." He puts out a statement via his Twitter account, and he lived on Twitter when he first got here. He hasn't tweeted much at all the last few years. He puts out a statement on Friday on his Twitter account. I expect to be the coach here next year, is what he says. Monday does a 2-hour Zoom interview with the Denver Broncos. All right. That stuff, you just can't do that in a professional culture.
All right, let me throw this out at you,
room.
Steve. Steve Deace, Michigan Insider on the Out of Bounds show. Warren Manuel, or however you say his name, basically, because Jim is Jim, because he's Harbaugh, the chosen one, the chosen son, the former QB, and now has beat Ohio State twice and led y'all to the college football playoff in back-to-back years. Even with everything you just walked us through, which I agree with you, he still holds the aces, right? Ward can't do anything. The chancellor of Michigan can't do anything. Is that right?
Sure they can. You do whatever they want, especially now that you got a notice of allegations for a level 1 violation from the NCAA. They could fire him with cause for that tomorrow if they wanted to.
Yeah, but okay, so he decided not to.
This is where we're different than you guys are, and I say that I'm on you guys' side. Okay, I mean, to me, the NCAA is a little bit like the dweeb hall monitor. Okay, I mean, who cares that I paid a guy who might break his neck at any point in time wearing my uniform? I paid his mom's mortgage or bought him a car. Okay, I mean. The guy's risking literally life and limb for my university. I think, we can handle his mom's light bill.
Sure.
I understand your subculture down there. It doesn't run like that up here, though. Okay. Sanctimony. We love our sanctimony up here, brother. Okay. We love it. We drown in it. Okay. We love to be able to say we don't break those stupid, silly rules that don't do anything other than help the NCAA buy even more high-level real estate there in Indianapolis. Okay. I mean, we love to say we're just morally superior up here. All right. So that is a very big deal. And I'm telling you right now that if he had not beaten Ohio State the last 2 years and got a level 1 notice of allegation, I don't care if it is for buying kids burgers that showed up for unofficial, whatever the reason is, he'd have been fired. I promise you that.
Really?
Absolutely would have been fired for that. Yeah. Dude, Jim Tressel got fired for virtually the same thing.
Well, that's a great point.
Getting tattoos.
There wasn't anything there.
And Ohio State's the closest thing we have up here to y'all down there. Okay. So if Ohio State couldn't withstand that, where Cardale Jones literally tweeted out, at Ohio State, they didn't make me have to major in school. I just got to play football. Okay. At Michigan, which prides itself on telling a few recruits every year they're not good enough to get into school. Michigan, we pride ourselves on that.
Wow.
Okay? So at Michigan, absolutely. If this had happened in 2019, after you got 60 pointed by Ohio State again, he'd be gone right now. I promise you that's the case. Yeah. So they're going to stand by him, one, because the NCAA's reputation since 2019 has, whatever it was in 2019, it's subterranean now. That's number one. But number two, now he's beating Ohio State, naming the score against them and playing in the playoffs. So he does have, I agree with you, he has more clout. But I don't believe he holds all the aces at all. And frankly, if I were sitting in Ward Manuel's office, I have to ask myself, I know I can't do this every year from a recruiting standpoint. Two, I don't believe Jim Harbaugh can definitively say no to the NFL. Just like Guinevere can't definitively say no to Lancelot. The heart wants. Doesn't mean she doesn't love Arthur. Doesn't mean she doesn't want the best for Camelot. But the heart wants what the heart wants. Okay? Three, if I'm going to do this every year, if I'm going to pick the perfect scenario for me to have to bring in a new coach, when is it? Now, actually. It's now. It's now when I've got J.J. McCarthy and Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards all coming back. Or if it's not that I want to bring in a new coach, but I think in, offensive coordinator Sharon Moore, who's a superstar, I think I might have the next kind of Lincoln Riley level assistant. And you do what Oklahoma did. You give him the job in June, maybe 2 or 3 years before he should have gotten it. But when the program is coming off a great season, Baker Mayfield's coming back. He's got the right team and talent on the field to kind of hit the ground running, and then just sort of, recruit like a mother until he kind of figures this thing out and gets his feet wet. I'm thinking this is now the moment to bring Sharon Moore in, and let the new era of Michigan football go. And he's my Lincoln Riley, rather than sticking him, when, a year from now when all these guys leave. So I would actually rather make that transition now than a year or two from now. If that's what I'd be thinking if I was Michigan. Now, I'd rather not make the transition at all. Okay. But what I can't have, even worse than making the transition, if this happens on a year-to-year basis, that will kill recruiting, at least from the from the standard that Michigan needs to sustain. All right, we went from the 3 best classes in terms of identifying culture fit and talent than we have had at Michigan this century, the last 3 in a row. And it's no coincidence now that you've seen the last 2 seasons as a result. We went from that to one of the lowest rated recruiting classes Michigan's had this century.
Okay.
So, and that was coming off one of the best seasons we've ever had as a university. Now we're in the top 3 in the final AP poll when consecutive seasons. That hasn't happened since 1947 and 48. Bo had 17 of his 21 teams finish in the top 10, but he never finished top 3 consecutive years.
He couldn't win the postseason. I mean, he couldn't.
Correct.
Yeah.
So this is even by Michigan standards, we are in rarefied air right now. We should be recruiting at the Alabama, especially with the NIL collective we are about to announce here in the next couple of months.
All right, tell me about that.
Finally decided.
Hold on, let me reset real quick. Steve Deace, Michigan Insider, on the Out of Bounds show, and the Patron Tequila guest line. We're talking Harbaugh, his future. What is Michigan today compared to 8 years ago, and how Harbaugh has modernized their program. And now I want to get into NIL because we've been talking NIL the last 2 years. Are y'all about to be heavily invested in the NIL world, Steve?
So this is something that I said earlier. This is something that about you guys down there and how you roll that we don't understand. Okay. And now here's something maybe you guys down there don't understand about us up here. Our universities up here have endowments and alumni bases that blow the Alabamas out of the world. I mean, the Bubba, the car, the car mogul that owns 6 parking car lots in Birmingham, Alabama, who's given all the $500 handshakes or whatever they are. Maybe they're 5,000 these days. I don't know. Okay.
They are.
But you know the expression. Yeah. Okay. That guy is a ham and egger in our alumni circles up here. All right. The problem is these schools, like I said earlier, up here, we love our sanctimony. Well, Michigan has a new president now, and he's the guy that basically turned Cincinnati into a football powerhouse when he was the president there. He doesn't care about any of that crap. He likes winning a lot. All right. So Michigan has finally announced collectives that it endorses as a university. A lot of Big Ten schools won't even do that. Michigan has already put out notice. Here are the collectives that we endorse and urge you to donate to support our players. And I'm told in the next couple of months here, Michigan will announce a baseline collective. I don't think Michigan, until it becomes unless it becomes clearly the new NCAA rule, I don't think Michigan will ever do upfront pay for play with recruits. I don't think. I think it still wants to hold on to some of its sanctimony. So it'll do something a little different, but it'll be virtually the same thing. Position groups will all be given substantial base NIL funding, and you'll get that for being on scholarship and a player at Michigan. You just won't get it for signing at Michigan. And I think it'll be fairly substantial and lucrative, and I think it'll probably set the standard for what a lot of schools in our area code will announce and decide moving forward. I think.
Who's been the most aggressive NIL-wise in the Big Ten?
Probably Michigan State's been very aggressive, and I think you've seen that with the transfer portal.
Yeah, which burned them. You can't go 30. Mel Tucker went 30-plus players in the transfer portal, and then they go 5-7, as you know, Steve. So you can't go, boy, Tucker made a bad mistake. Do you think Michigan and Ohio State will continue to sign, around 25 high school players a year and then dabble in the portal or go heavy portal?
Yes. I think we were able to, we went heavier this year and got a lot of the top guys in the portal this year. I mean, basically us in Florida State kind of cleaned up a lot of the top guys, but we needed to do that to supplement what by our standards was a mediocre class. Okay. I think in the future, getting guys into your culture that you can assimilate, that become a fabric of passing on your heritages, your traditions. I think it'll be much more about identifying, developing players, and the portal will be like the frosting on the cake to go, if a guy goes pro you didn't expect, you go find a guy that can fit in. If you go back to the NIL question you asked me, I think a lot of people are surprised that I didn't say Ohio State. Ohio State, again, it behaves more like an SEC school than any of our schools, but it is still culturally a Big Ten school. One of the big issues up here is that the ADs and administrations are concerned that the big donors would rather give to collectives and directly to the players than to the athletic department. And so Ryan Day has made multiple comments going back to last August about their NIL insufficiency. He was complaining on signing day that they lost guys because of it. Keep in mind, Ohio State, until they brought that NHL team in there about a decade or so ago, that was the biggest TV market in the country that didn't have a major pro sports, is Columbus, Ohio. They have an incredible amount of money just sitting there, and no NFL team or Major League Baseball team for skyboxes to support. So they've got some institutional issues there too, where their administration is concerned. If we just turn our boosters loose and our donors loose, that they can just give directly to the players, are they going to give us another $30 million for the next track and field complex we want to buy? All right, probably no, because they'd rather give it to the football player, because no one cares. The only thing worse than track is field. No one cares. Okay? That is a big concern that the administrators up here have. And some of it is just a lack of experience. Like at Texas knows its donors. They got so many donors. Guys give $30 million for the track and field complex because there's nothing in the football or basketball programs left for them to put their name on.
Right.
All right. It'll take a few years, and donors in Michigan and Ohio State and Penn State, they'll recognize that. Okay. But this is new to us. You know, this sort of culture that y'all have lived with down there for decades, it's kind of got foisted on us. It's an ecosystem that's unfamiliar to us. It's going to take some time for us to get our feet underneath us.
Okay. Do you think Michigan, with seeing what Georgia and LSU and Bama have done, and the 4 straight national titles and everything else, I've only got about a minute and a half. Do you believe that Michigan can win a title, considering where the talent's in the Sun Belt and Florida and Texas and so on?
I do actually, in this environment. If Michigan decided it wanted to fully take advantage of NIL, then I do think that it could win a national championship. I think if we were recruiting straight up, and we had this is the irony of those of us up north that want real NCAA enforcement. If we actually had real NCAA enforcement, then I think the demographics you're talking about would work even harsher against us. All right. The fact now that maybe we can get some of those kids to come up here at higher rated universities and maybe make more money, I think that gives us an opportunity to maybe democratize the process a little bit more.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there. Steve Deace, Michigan Podcast, at Michigan Podcast on Twitter, weighing in on Jim Harbaugh and his future, and, you know, what could happen with the Michigan, well, the Big Ten, too. And Steve Deace, thank you, buddy. We appreciate it, man.
You got it, guys. Happy New Year.
All right, so can Michigan win a national title? I think it's going to be extremely difficult, even more difficult once we get to a 12-team playoff. We're live in the Bank Plus studio, Out of Bounds, ESPN 105.9 The Zone, brought to you by Miskelly Sleep Stores. You can find the amazing purple mattress from any of the Miskelly Sleep Stores in Mississippi, Jackson, Hattiesburg, among other spots. We're streaming live on the zone1059.com. We'll have another topic coming up, but OC, AD, Mississippi State, looks like OC's the focus.